Welcome to a dialogue on accountability in the digital age. A dialogue with our global multi-stakeholder community, representing national and local governments, international policymakers, civil society, NGOs, the ICT industry, as well as other relevant organizations and institutes.
Hello there, I'm your host Frits Bussemaker, and today I'm delighted and privileged to have a conversation with Nicolas Diaz. Nicolas, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Yes. Now, currently Nicolas is living and working in Germany, although has lived in Denmark before, but originally he's from Argentina. He's doing his postdoctorate fellow at the University of Duisburg-Essen in the areas of privacy and cybersecurity, with a main research focus on human-computer interaction, with special attention to privacy decision-making process. He also attended both summits at The Hague, so really thank you for that. And again, welcome in the program, Nicolas.
Pleasure.
Now, let's first focus on your research in cybersecurity. What's the topic you are working on?
So I started my PhD in 2015 after working in the industry as a software developer. And I started doing my research in the direction of privacy decision making, basically in the area of self-disclosure in social network sites. So basically, I was starting to think about why do people share so much private information on social media, which are the main factors, either from a psychological point of view and either from the more technical point of view. And at that point in time, the landscape of privacy technologies were turning into that direction. And actually, the research in terms of privacy was turning into that direction. But if we think about privacy as it was conceived and investigated, for example, like 25 years ago, it was mostly focused on problems related to control and security. So I always put a movie from Sandra Bullock from 1995, where some hackers tried to steal her identity, as an example on how the constellation was at that point. And I always make my point that at that point in time, if you wanted to find out where someone lived, if you wanted to find out details about their personal life, you needed to be an expert, you needed to be a hacker. But that after social networks were introduced, you don't have to be an expert, because basically these are spaces where we make our private life public and accessible to a wide and diverse audiences. So I saw that this change of paradigm was mostly a problem for regular users and regular people, and as up to which extent people is knowledgeable about the risks that are taken when they share to such a large extent their private data and aspects of their private life online. And therefore, I started to think, okay, what can we do from a technological point of view to help privacy decision making in a networked online environment?
Okay. Now, you said that people share a lot of information online. That's true. But is there a reason? Have you identified a reason why people do that?
So there are many theories and reasons also grounded on the psychological, let's say, point of view. On the one hand, for example, you have people with high levels of narcissism. They have a clear tendency to become more more public on social networks, and also people, for example, with high levels of impression management. But what I found for me, like one of the most how can I say clear reasons was that people have very low awareness about the risks of these practices. And on the other hand, I found out, okay, where can I find information about what could possibly go wrong when my data goes online and it's shared through such a broad platform? And then I found out, okay, there's nothing that gives me the sense that something wrong can happen here. I mean, platforms are very, they present themselves as very safe places, as places where people can connect with other people, where they can just have a great time, and this actually instead of like preventing information disclosure, is encouraging information disclosure. Come on, share your data, connect with your friends, do you post some pictures and so on. And but if you want to, for example, have an impression of what could go wrong, not only in terms of data leakage, which is more related to what could possibly happen on the server side of the platform, but how the dynamics of this platform could operate against you, there's nothing mentioned. You will never find that something like, oh, don't share your personal your phone number on the platform, because then people might contact you massively and you will be stalked or whatever. Don't share, for example, financial information. And we see that people systematically end up sharing this type of sensitive data online. So I said, okay, we have to put more stress on how to communicate this type of risk, but from a very user-centered point of view.
Okay, are these examples of digital nudging you just mentioned, also by just omitting the risks, so it looks safe enough?
So basically, that's a very good question, and actually, I put a lot of effort on the elaboration of nudges. So basically, nudges or choice architectures are basically changes that we introduce in the context where decisions are made, actually with the purpose of maximizing the welfare of the end user. In the case of nudges for cybersecurity, there is, for example, the most typical one that you could find is the password meter. So basically, you introduce a password, for example, when you want to register on a web page, and the password meter will tell you how the strength of the password in terms of security, if it's secure enough or not. So basically, displaying that kind of information actually should help the user to make a better decision, deciding for a more stronger password. And in the case of information disclosure on social networks, the principle could be applied in the same way. So the idea would be to incorporate some kind of system that whenever people is actually about to make a decision related to privacy, would communicate the risks that are relevant for that decision. And actually, this is something that it's very much clear from even if you analyze it from a consumer point of view. How can you make the best possible decision when you don't have the right information? Okay, and I mean, in our daily offline, in our daily life, every time that we make a decision, the risk factor it's there, and it is very strong. Whether we buy a product or whether we hire a service, knowing the risk can help us to reflect not only on the consequences, but actually can make us help on better decisions.
Okay, so coming back to your password example, I regularly also have to create a password given a couple of constraints, but it only gives me the constraints without telling me what the risks are if I don't make use of those constraints. And that's actually your point. Add that as well, so you explain to people why we're doing this.
Exactly. So the password meter, that's a limitation of not only of the password meter, but for many I would say nudging strategies. Of course, trying to promote a better behavior should be should come along with a detailed information of what this decision entails. And I think that since the risk factor is quite determinant here, it's better to provide that information and at the right point in time.
Okay. Now, in your opinion, what's the biggest threat for accountability in a digital age today?
Oh, so I think that in terms of accountability, there's a big problem among developers. I think that developers see accountability as something that it's so far away from their daily life, and they struggle to understand when and up to which extent their actions are accountable, and how to demonstrate that they're actually compliant with what legal provisions are establishing. That's on the one hand. I also think that the amount of how can I say, the power of big tech companies that they self-regulate very often. It's also a threat for accountability. I think that there should be a way for harnessing these provisions that actually are on behalf or try to safeguard people's security and privacy rights. Yeah.
And then if you then go back to those big companies, obviously they're building technology. So coming back to your point you just made, the developers working there should or could be held accountable to actually deliver technology which meets the standards we as a society demand.
Exactly. And the problem is that this is an issue that touches points related to ethics and to ethical behavior, or I would say best practices. I think that the key word for me, and I mean also being a former developer, would be technical responsibility. I think we have to increase the sense of technical responsibility among the developer community so they can understand that their decisions, although they seem quite trivial because work it's repetitive over and over, it might have a high impact on society, not only in individual level but also on a collective level.
Okay, yeah. And in your opinion, who could enforce that? That we get developers to act in that particular way?
I think it should be like a joint effort. On the one hand, me, if I look back and how my training as a software engineer and as a computer scientist was some years ago, around 10, I would say. I think although they were trying to put some stress on ethical problems and this technical responsibility, I think the landscape of the technology itself was not so broad as it is now. Now we have social networks, now we have Bitcoin, now we have all of these technologies that are promised on the one hand to bring society to a more, how can I say, prosper future. But on the other hand, we see that many things can go wrong if decisions are not in the right way. And so I think that education is fundamental. It should be like a cornerstone of any developers or any developer or an engineer. And on the other hand, of course, you have law enforcement, and you should have, of course, the right legal framework for it. We have it. I mean, there have been lots of efforts. Now we have the new draft for AI, trustworthy AI, but still mapping these provisions that are on a very legal term and bring it closer to the not only the language that developers speak, but also closer to the reality that developers have to face every day. I think that's the challenge, and there we have to create the synergy between academia, between legal experts, between policymakers. Yeah.
Now, I think, yeah, I definitely see that. And in your opinion, where are we today with the whole issue, this whole issue of unaccountability?
So it's for me, as I mentioned before, we have on the one hand, we have the developers that have to materialize this provisions and make accountable software or solutions. And on the other hand, we have the end users that are lacking of how can I say, the adequate means for making adequate decisions and or privacy-related decisions on the internet. I think this is where we stand, and we should elaborate, especially on the human factor of technology, because what I think is that normally we see technology that it's something that just comes up and it's there and should be therefore harnessed. But actually, technology has a process. Technology should embed features that would help meet requirements of people and also from developers as well. So I think that we should watch the whole pipeline and not the last part of the pipeline.
Great point. So, so where specific digital platforms are mostly designed to provide privacy information disclosure, how can we balance that? What can we do to counter that movement?
Yeah, Yeah, of course, platforms, I would say the economic model behind not only social networks, but big platforms in general, it's through data and targeted advertisement as well. I think that as I we also already have done some work in regarding consumer law, as I said in the past. So
Okay.
I always compare this with the information on cigarette packages.
Yeah.
So this health warning label saying smoking can give you cancer, this was not the default. So the cigarettes were coming in like a normal packaging without any kind of warning, and the warnings were introduced after a very hectic debate. Actually, I think it's around the 60s in the United States. But what was the argument from the tobacco companies? They were saying, oh, consumers are aware about the risk, we should not include that. And in the end, it was demonstrated that no, people were not aware about the risk, and they should deserve this kind of information. I think it's the same debate. We should have it for the platforms. I think that this is something that should be a corner point, a cornerstone on the discussion of accountability.
Okay, well, that's actually quite a bold statement when you start to compare surfing the internet with smoking.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day,
Yeah,
I understand
definitely.
where you're coming from, and so we have to make these risks as explicit for the consumer, so that they know what they're getting into.
Yeah, definitely. At least make them more visible and approachable for people. I mean, this is not something that I say. It's also in the GDPR. The GDPR is quite risk oriented if you look at it, and it's one of the main challenges that software companies are having at this point. How to conduct a data privacy impact assessment or a risk assessment of the technologies that they are developing. It's not an easy task in terms of development, but on the other hand, in terms of risk communication, it should not be impossible. It should
Okay.
be doable.
Now, for me, it sounds like very simple. We just add a small warning to everything we do. But how do we get there? Because somehow I feel that that's not going to be easy.
Yeah, exactly. So actually, it's not of course, on the surface, it looks quite trivial. Okay, let's fill the platform with I don't know, icons and risk information all over. This should not also be the case. There should be some balance between this type of information and the type of decisions that people make. They should also be decisions should not be harnessed. So people should also have the freedom of make whatever decisions they want. If they want to share their whole life, if they want to share a copy of their medical records, okay, go ahead. But please be aware of what can go wrong.
Okay, but you're not prohibiting people. You're just giving them a warning. I mean, hey,
exactly.
Do that at your own risk.
Yeah, definitely. That should be the message. But of course, there is a lot of resistance from tech companies to do so, because that's actually would redirect the flow of information disclosure. I mean, it will actually prevent it to be so massive. So I think that this that I am just defining in very simple words, I think the policy community should embrace it more. They should realize that, okay, the technology is like this, but we should think out of the box. What if we add this? What if we change this? I mean, it should be possible to introduce changes. Technologies are changing constantly. The problem is that they're changing in the way tech companies want them to change. But I think it's time that we say, okay, we want them to change on behalf of people's privacy and security rights, on behalf of data protection.
So that small warning could be a way to nudge all the platforms to move in a more responsible direction as well.
Exactly. I mean, but they're not. No one tells them to do so, or there's nothing that obliges them to comply with this type of warnings. I mean, it's only on the on academic papers, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I think that this is an idea that should be definitely embraced.
Got it. So, in your mind, who should be at the table to make that happen?
I think everyone should be at the table. I think that
Can you be a little bit more precise what you mean by everyone?
yeah, definitely. Policymakers definitely, because
Yeah.
they are the ones who have the knowledge for shaping the corresponding provisions, legal provisions. Academia should also be there so they can provide new and fresh ideas on the table, and of course we need tech companies to also open their mind and acknowledge that this is a problem, and that this in one point at this point in time, this is a problem that could be defined as minor, at least from their point of view, but this can easily scale. We have seen that, especially with problems regarding fake news and everything that we have seen, massive leakage of personal information and so on. It's all interconnected. It's everything interconnected. So if we want to create a more secure virtual space, then we should collaborate, all of us.
Great. That's a great objective. Now, how can the Institute for Accountability in Digital help here?
Well, I think it's based on my experience during 2018 and 2019. I think it's already bridging the gap in a quite significant way, because I have seen a plurality of voices in both symposiums, and I think bringing people with ideas that are out of the box. I think these ideas should be there, should be discussed, should be elaborated. I mean, from my point of view, and from my, I was, I think in 2018, I was about to finish my PhD, and the feedback that I got from the community there was really, really valuable, and I was able to introduce it in my thesis. So I really think it's working. It's already a good starting point. I think we should go a little bit more massive. Yeah.
No, that's definitely our objective, to be a catalyst for that discussion, which is still needed on accountability, given the world is moving to this whole digital environment. So yeah, there's still a role for us to play. And yeah, thank you for confirming that, but also glad that it helped also with your research. Now, before we go, Nicolas, given your research on nudging, cybersecurity, what's the takeaway you'd like to give to the audience to think about?
So I found a text that it was given to me when I was in high school. It's actually the preface from Fahrenheit 451. It was written 75 years ago, but I think it's still relevant.
Okay, you're making me curious now.
Yeah, it basically says the machines themselves are empty gloves into which a hand, either cold and excessively bony, or warm, full-fleshed and gentle, can be inserted. The hand is always the hand of a man, and the hand of a man can be good or evil, while the gloves themselves remain amoral. So I think this resumes pretty much the problems that we see at the moment. And actually, if you think about it, Fahrenheit was a dystopian novel written 75 years ago. And over the last years, we have seen some of these dystopian aspects coming into reality, and which is quite scary, such as massive surveillance. So I think that this should help us to reflect into what a better future should be in terms of accountability, data protection, and privacy rights.
Okay. Hey, that's a great quote. We'll make certain that we put in a link to where people can find the book. And yeah, this is a book which demonstrates, again, accountability is about people at the end of the day. We cannot blame the technology, and we have to get the people to do the right thing. So, Nicolas, very much, I'd like to thank you for sharing your insights, your research on how we can nudge people in the right direction. And wish you luck with the rest of your research. And thank you for contribution.